Hey friends, Michael Scott-Overold here, copywriter and consultant. When my second child was learning to ride a bike, I used a funny method to help. We were in the backyard and I left one of the training wheels on so that they could lean against it when wobbly. It worked in that they felt confident about their ability to ride a bike with one less training wheel after they rode around the yard a couple of times. But then I did something a little sneaky. I loosened the bolt enough on this one training wheel to swivel it up. It was still on the bike, but not available to lean on because it was now sticking straight out behind them, parallel to the ground. In their mind, the wheel was there, ready and steady, so they took off on another venture into the backyard. After they made the full lap, I told them what I had done. They didn't need the training wheel anymore because they realized they had been riding without it all along. We took it off forever. Cam Nichols is a life coach for introverts. One of the concepts he sticks to is that confidence is connected to a person's self-worth, which means that the effort of building one's confidence depends on their memory, really. It's a fascinating and brilliant argument that insists the key to both is remembering who they are. Anabasis means the ascent or inward journey, and I'm journeying into the coaching world with Cam Nichols today, where we'll talk confidence, courage, and life as introverts. I hope you enjoy.
It is all about helping people through the journey of rediscovering who they are. Because I'm a very firm believer that self-worth and confidence, it can't be destroyed or created. It's remembered or it's forgotten. And I want to help people remember who they are. Yeah, so my name is Cam Nichols, and I am the life coach for shy introverts, helping them to stop hiding and start living without being anxious all the time. And that was a mouthful, but it's super important because the drive is I am my own client. I am my first client. And that's something that I really struggled with, and I've watched my clients struggle with of just being really shy and having that stop them from living the life that they want. My philosophy, I certified through the life coach school with Brooke Castillo. So my main tool, I use the model is what she calls it. And essentially it's we have these circumstances in our life, and we think that the circumstance makes us feel a certain way, but it's not. It's our thoughts about the circumstance that make us feel a certain way. And then those feelings drive our actions and give us our results. And so between that and intuition and emotional processing, it is all about helping people through the journey of rediscovering who they are. Because I'm a very firm believer that we don't forget, or self-worth and confidence, it can't be destroyed or created. It's remembered or it's forgotten. And I want to help people remember who they are.
Talk to me a little bit more about this idea of confidence being remembered, though.
When you think about it, confidence is a beautiful thing. And I think it's also a fallacy of what it looks like. We're given this idea of what confidence and success looks like, but it's the formula that we've been given, it doesn't work for everybody, right? And so when you think about it, when you are a baby, you're not worried about confidence. That's just not something that you're worried about. And then you just kind of start to grow and develop, and you're out there trying new things and getting hurt and crying and screaming and laughing. And then you go to school and it's okay, this is how you need to function. These are the behaviors that need to happen. right? Then you go to college and then you go into the workforce. And like just slowly over time, we are given so many programs that are not our own, but that teach us what, quote, successful is in life, what happiness is. You follow this formula and you will be happy. But that's like complete bullshit. Right? There's over 7.8 billion people in the world, I think is what I heard last. And it's like, yeah, the formula isn't going to match for everyone. So it's like, how can you, I don't want to say like revert back to childhood, but how can you harness that energy and remember those things from childhood and nourish them and get rid of all of this old programming? Because that's where you're going to find true happiness and creativity, and you're going to go do things that you want to do and live a life and intentionally design the life that you want to live. You live what you envision.
So, what are some of the techniques that you use to rediscover that childhood confidence, innocence? I'm not exactly sure how you would phrase it necessarily. What are some of the techniques you use?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things that my people struggle with the most, and that I've personally struggled with a lot, is shame, guilt, and blame, right? Shame, guilt, and blame. And there's just a lot of judgment and fear of being judged. So, a lot of what I do with my clients is I teach them a lot about emotions, right? This is where the emotion ninja, Jessica's description, kind of comes into play, because I'm a very emotional being. And it's something that I fought for so long because I was told emotions were wrong. Don't be so dramatic. You're too theatrical. Like, you're overconfident. All of these things that I kind of took on and made them mean awful things. So it's like, here's the issue, and then here's the judgment on top of it. So first, I have to help my people remove the judgment through different forms of compassion, of retraining their brain into compassion before we can even address the real problem. And a lot of that just has to do with neuroplasticity and learning more about how the brain works and how your emotions work and how it all functions together, so that you can consciously remind yourself when some of these old thoughts and programs come up, because they're not going to go away. And I think that's a big misconception in the healing and wellness industry, is that some of these thoughts and feelings, like, they won't be there anymore. And that's not true.
Psychologist who champions self-compassion, she makes the argument that the first step towards self-compassion, which is, it sounds like what you're talking about when I hear you talking, is mindfulness. Do you incorporate mindful practices in your coaching?
100% yes. So, I mean, if we were to talk about like the nervous system, right? Your nervous system gets so heightened through, like, you're probably hearing this a lot in media and wellness groups, of just like, we're talking a lot about trauma and healing trauma, right? So it is extremely easy to become traumatized. It can be something as extreme as like physical, mental, sexual abuse, or it could be something as simple as you're a kid and you drop your ice cream cone in the park. Like, both of those things can be traumatic events, and your psyche can't really tell the difference. And so when you are triggered, your nervous system gets heightened, right? That's where a lot of judgment, anxiety, overthinking, all of that stuff comes in. And so mindfulness is a way to help bring the nervous system down and help calm that primitive brain, that unevolved part of the brain, the amygdala in the back of our head or the back of our brain, help calm that down so that we can then move into our prefrontal cortex and make conscious and intentional decisions. And so mindfulness is one of the best ways that I've personally found to really help calm the nervous system and bring you back to focus so that you can consciously choose.
That's a beautiful description of it. I've been practicing mindfulness now for a couple of years, and what I've found is the ability to lean into harder conversations, things that where maybe a little ashamed of what I'm feeling. Right? This is what you were talking about sounds very familiar, and I resonate with that. But mindfulness has been a chance to kind of lean into it, recognize the emotions for what they are, maybe what message they might have for me as a person, and then go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next week's episode is actually with Will Schneider of Men Talking Mindfulness podcast. Have you heard of that one?
Ooh, no, I haven't. Sounds
Yeah.
great though.
Yeah. He's coming up right after you. So I think this is a plug for next week, but I think that you're providing a great segue into next week in that
That's awesome. Yeah.
When I was researching your online coaching presence, I got this feeling that you're an advocate for introverts, and that's correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And I love it because I consider myself an introvert as well. However, I'm curious to know what your definition of an introvert is. Can you elaborate on this? And then maybe even the claim that you make that the world is geared toward extroverts?
So let me start with that statement. Like, the world is geared towards extroverts. What's the old saying of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, yeah, extroverts are more, they're louder, stereotypically, of course, right? This is going to vary from person to person, but stereotypically it's like they're louder. They're the ones that want to get out of the house, that don't want to be by themselves. They want to be out and around and surrounded by people. And so a lot of the systems, worldly systems that we have, like the school system and government and all of that, is very geared towards extroverts and how they work and how they function. But shy introverts, well, just introverts in general, they tend to be extraordinarily intelligent, ridiculously and amazingly empathetic. Like, there's just this depth to them that doesn't get heard because of how the systems are set up. And so helping them step into that power of where they can be heard, I think, like, that's where my passion lies. And so differentiating between introvert and extrovert, I like to think of it as like, I don't believe it's like just one or the other. I believe that we're all just kind of like on the scale. So I don't know if you've heard of the Kinsey scale. It's a scale that measures sexuality from like 0 heterosexual to 7 purely homosexual, right? And when you start to look at things on a sliding scale like that, that's kind of what I put introvert and extroversion to. It's like everyone falls on the list, but it's really rare to like have one of the extreme outliers. But like a simple way that I like to define introverts and extroverts is like, think of it as a bank with money. The extrovert wakes up with a $0 bank account. Every interaction they get, they're adding money, aka energy, to their bank, right? Introverts wake up with a full bank account, and every interaction they give money away. And so then at the end of the day, they end up with 0.
Yeah.
Right. So then it's just about energy exchange and recharging and all of that.
So I resonate with the energy exchange metaphor because I find myself, I need time alone to begin the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me a better person with other people. And a lot of my work is done, purely by myself. I work remotely. So by the evening, I'm ready to cook. I'm ready to spend some time with people. I want to have a conversation, but reverse that order and make me have conversations first thing in the morning, and I'll be wasted by 11 o'clock a.m. So
It takes your day and spirals it in a
yeah,
completely different direction.
yeah, yeah. I get it. That's really helpful. Thank you for that analogy. Um, I see the word confidence about as often as I see the word introvert on your website. And you've talked a little bit about this already in terms of remembering a confidence that we had when we were children.
Mhm.
Is this a central issue more often than not that you deal with regarding introverted clients?
Yeah, I mean, like if we were to boil it down to its very base, what we're talking about is worth, self-worth, right? Do you value yourself as a human being? The things that you view as flaws or that other people view as flaws, do you view them as strengths? Or are you believing what someone told you that they are a flaw? And so the difference between confidence versus self-confidence, and this is something that I work with my clients on and kind of teach them through. So you get like a mini lesson. It's like confidence is based on things that you've done in the past. You have evidence to prove that you've done it before, right? I'm confident I can pour a glass of water. Self confidence is believing in yourself without having the evidence. So it's believing in your future without having the evidence to back it up. So you are fueled by yourself of, because at one time you couldn't just pour water, right? Again, kind of like going back to when you're a little kid, you go to pour it and it like spills everywhere, right? And so there's just this mentality that we take through life and we forget what true self confidence is. And I like to joke all the time that I'm like a princess, a king, I'm royalty. And like I do it sassily and sarcastically, but at the same time, there's also a truth to it because once you kind of recognize your own worth, it's like, how can you not be confident? And it doesn't mean confident. I think a lot of people are afraid to be confident because they're afraid of being arrogant. And I think the biggest difference is having confidence is just like living it. Arrogance is trying to prove it to someone else and prove that it's better than where they're at. And it's
I
like they're
see.
two completely different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially when you put it that way. Question though about the way that you described confidence being, I believe that I will be able to do something when I don't have evidence of of having done
Mhm.
it already. Um, Anxiety, as I've experienced, often has a future quality to it. Like I'm anxious because I'm not sure of what's going to happen in the future. All right.
Yes.
Do you find anxiety to be the opposite of confidence? Because when I hear lack of confidence, that doesn't really tell me much of anything. It's got to be replaced by something, right? So
Yeah.
is it often the dichotomy of helping people move from an anxious mindset to a more confident mindset?
Yeah. Like the dichotomy of the confidence, kind of like what you said, like anxiety, overthinking, depression, all of that is the opposite of confidence, right? And like I'm not a doctor and I'm all for like prescription meds if you need them, like talk to your medical professionals. But it's like, yeah, when you are not afraid of an emotion, because really emotions drive every single thing that we do, we don't do, everything we accomplish or don't accomplish. It's just emotion, right? The emotion is what drives our actions, and the actions are what give us our result. Most of the things that we want in life in the future is because if we think that we'll feel a certain way once we get it, right? That's also why we avoid things. I don't want to feel insecure. So I'm not going to put myself in a situation to go out and meet someone where I'm going to start thinking these thoughts and make myself feel insecure about myself. And so I completely forgot where I was going with that. But
That's okay. I think you ended it really well right there. Let's just land the plane there. That's great. How is your coaching contributing to a more empathetic, sustainable world?
yeah, so I like to think that my coaching helps contribute to the empathy of the world, because I think a lot of empathy is missing. Um, I think there's a lot of separation of you do you, I do me type kind of thing, but then we all have to work together as people. And when we can understand more about how the human body functions, how the psychology of humans function, I think it gives us an opportunity to step outside of ourselves and step into another person's perspective. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean that you have to change to be like someone else, but it's just that ability to step out and step in so you can have a better understanding of why their concerns are what they are or what their problems are. So I'm all about empathy and emotions, and that is my gift to humanity.
Well, I notice, as you're talking about it, one of the things I'm remembering about your website is you've got a bunch of like fairly confident poses, like the way that the pictures are. They certainly give the impression of someone who has reconciled any sort of problems you may have had with emotions, growing up, or any sort of fears you might have had with confronting emotions growing up, and they look very confident. Is that kind of a deliberate move?
So it was not a deliberate move, and it's also not 100% true. Like, so kind of like what I said, like I want to make sure the record is straight here. Like I still have confidence, lack of confidence in certain areas and insecurities and doubts, and they're just not a problem anymore. Right. So it's like I've taken all of those on from the world, but it's not an issue. But what I love about the pictures that you're referring to kind of goes back to my origin story of how I started my business. It's like I was working in corporate leadership. I had been there for like 8.5 years. And I always wanted to have a life coaching business. So I signed up for certification in late August, and I got laid off from my corporate job mid-September. And instead of going to find something else, it was like, no, this is what I want to do. Like, this is my sign, universe, God, whoever, like, this is it. And I have believed in myself enough through that to build this business. And so those pictures were taken near the beginning of that time. I want to say they were taken late September. But I think you bring up a good point of like the confidence in them is real, 100%. But confidence is not meant to feel 100% of the time, if that makes sense. It's like
Sure.
at
I mean, it's a
best,
process. Yeah.
yeah, at best you can only feel it 50% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who has gone through the process of starting his own business, there's a lot of like challenges to confidence during that startup phase. Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it.
I mean, it's sincere. I mean, there are times, wake up and it's like, okay, can I do this? I use a mindful writing practice to get me to point zero that says, yes, I can do this. I'm gonna move forward. How did you do it?
So I started with a mindful practice exercise, like you did, but then I started beating myself up because I don't like writing. And so then I started to like go into the shame, blame, and guilt situation. And so kind of what I've done, like I still do write sometimes, but a lot of the times I don't write for coherence. I will just write an emotion down or an image that I see. But what I've come to realize is like some of these old thoughts and programs of not good enough, you can't really do this, um, you're lying to everybody because you're not confident. Like I hear these thoughts and I just kind of, I'm at the point where it's like, that's an old boring story. Like, thanks for your time, but I got shit to do. Right. And so it's really just about how we, I don't want to say challenge the brain because I think challenge kind of gives the wrong word, but how we question and nurture the thoughts that come through. If you have a toddler who's yelling and screaming at you, you're not going to like slap them across the face, right? That's child abuse. But that's what we're doing to ourselves. Like that piece of our brain that's offering those programs and thoughts, it's not evolved. It's very much like a toddler. It can't fully communicate. And so how do you meet it where it's at? Help it understand, help it feel seen, heard, understood, and then move on.
I've never thought about shame being a form of self-abuse like that. It's helpful.
Yeah, it got dark there for a second. But please don't slap babies or toddlers.
Yeah. I think the analogy is appropriate. We often speak to ourselves in ways that we wouldn't speak to other people.
No.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when you start to examine that, it's like, okay, why not? Because it's a dick move.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. It's not nice. It's not who you want to be. It's not how you want to show up in the world. It doesn't contribute. But because it's someone else, it's easier. I mentioned this on a previous podcast that I recorded recently with like, there was a point in my life where I had a hard time like hanging pictures on my wall because if they were crooked, like I would just shame myself. So I got my husband to do it. I was like, yep, you hang all the pictures. You do all of that because if it's crooked, I didn't fuck it up and I can forgive you, but I can't forgive me. Right. And it's kind of that same mentality of like, no, we deserve better than what we're giving ourselves. And we have control over that. We might not have accountability for how some of these old programs came to be, but we do have a responsibility of building awareness, helping to change them, and becoming the person that you want to be, living the life that you want to live.
Thanks so much to Cam for taking the time to talk with me. You can find Cam's coaching services on his website, coachwithcam.com. He currently offers 2 coaching packages, a one-on-one 6-month personal coaching package, as well as an intimate group coaching package called Fuck the Formula, 6 weeks of discovery, deconditioning, and design that carries a 7-person maximum. Check him out, and I'll see you next week.